Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 109. Tonight, we are talking about out of the trenches, resilience in education. I've got Dana Goodier with me as a guest, and I'm so excited about this conversation. Listen, if you've ever felt stuck in the trenches of education, my guest, Dana, is going to talk all about turning struggles into strength. She is the author of Out of the Trenches, Stories of Resilient Educators, and the host of, guess this, Out of the Trenches podcast. Dana shares powerful stories of educators who have faced challenges and come out stronger. So that's what we're going to be talking about in this episode. Before we get started, I want to be sure to tell you how awesome the CEC convention was, Council for Exceptional Children convention was in Baltimore this past week. It was phenomenal. So if you want to know more about this conference, you need to look it up on all the social media platforms, hashtag CEC 2025. Let me tell you that my message about moving beyond silos resonated so deeply with the audience, and I would love to bring it to you, your organization, or your next event. So be sure to listen in at the end about how you can connect with me so I can bring that message to your organization and help you and your people break down the silos and build a culture of collaboration. All right, we're about to dive into tonight's episode, so get ready. Hey there, welcome to the Catching Up with Casey show. If you are tired of chasing buy-in, frustrated by teams who just can't seem to get on the same page, or over the constant struggle of holding people accountable without feeling like you're micromanaging, this is the show for you. I'm Casey Watts, team leadership expert and the host of this show. I specialize in clarity, collaboration, and character, and I help leaders just like you take teams from chaos to cohesion, from frustration to alignment, so teams can actually work together toward a common purpose instead of against each other as though they are functioning in different organizations. Whether you lead a single team or a team of teams, on this show, we talk about strategies that are going to help you create a culture where accountability and autonomy go hand in hand. Now, with all of that said, let's dive into today's conversation and build cohesive, vision-driven teams. Hey there, how's it going, Dana?
Great. Happy to be on.
Awesome. I'm so glad that you're here. Now, can you tell me that how you very specifically pronounce your last name to make sure that I got it right?
Goodier.
Okay, so I said it right.
Yes.
Okay, good. Because sometimes, like I'm thinking about multiple things at one time when I'm introducing guests, and the way that I say the names, I start to second guess, like, is that right? Did I say that right? It's kind of like when you spell the word over and over again, it's like, wait a minute, is that how you spell the word have? It is. Okay, great. I'm so glad that I pronounced it correctly. I'm excited to have you on the show tonight, and I'm really excited about this topic. I know a lot of people can feel like they are in the trenches in education. Tell us about the work that you do to get us started.
Well, as you mentioned in the intro, I host a podcast, Out of the Trenches, and I've hosted that podcast about 5 years now. And I got the idea to host it. Well, I listened to several educational leadership podcasts up to that point. And as many people did, I started it during the pandemic. But I also knew that that wasn't the only trench people were going through, right? There was a lot of exodus from education prior to that, and a lot of educators that needed support, right? And my goal is to show stories of resilience from the guests and, help them stay in education, which might not be in that same role. It might not be teaching the same subject or the same level. It might be doing something edu adjacent. But I feel like, that's our passion. That's our why, right? So those ideas then went into my book, which you mentioned, Out of the Trenches, Stories of Resilient Educators, which was published about 2 years ago. And it talks more about just diving into what makes you tick in education, how you define your own educational trenches, and really who you can lean on for support if there is no support at your school. I do speak on that topic at conferences. I just did a conference over the weekend where I spoke on it as well. Most of my educational background has been at the secondary level. So, I've kind of been in and out of trenches there as well. So,
Yeah. And I think that's one thing I really appreciate about the message that you bring is, and what you highlight is that we experience trenches in different ways.
yeah.
And I think sometimes when we hear people talk about feeling like they're in the trenches in education, we paint our own picture based on our own perspective and narratives, but everyone can come with different ideas and perceptions of what the trenches looks like for them. So I definitely applaud you in making it okay for people to have different experiences when it comes to that. I also really love this term that you threw out, edu adjacent. What a fantastic term. And
Yeah.
I love too, I think what I love about it is that, like when you're in the trenches, sometimes we feel like we have to muddle through it and you've got to find joy within it and all of those things. But truly, sometimes it requires you making a shift or move, and that also is okay.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that beat themselves up about maybe leaving education before those 5 years, or really not trying to look for things that still are serving students and or teachers in some way, or working with curricula, working with just teacher training in general. So I mean, we've always had teachers who leave within the first 1 to 5 years. And I think a lot of those teachers aren't aware of, other things they can do with the skills. But also, I think there are a lot of people like me who've been in it for 15 to 20 plus years, right? And, still want to serve students how they're currently serving, but there's been so much change. And, there's been one challenge after another. And as we're recording, we're the looming cuts with the government and possibly the closing of the Department of Ed. And for me, who's been in education so long, and we might be looking at a recession here, it's like, yeah, we had a recession in 2008, and those cuts to our salaries lasted until the 11-12 school year. So, I've been there, I've done it, right? And we have the Department of Ed, and as we're recording, we don't know if this is actually going to take place. But in any case, like it's just, and one more thing, right? That's that we're used to basically dealing with, right? We never have enough resources, and now we'll have less. There's always do more with less type of things. But I think COVID gave us that opportunity to at least re-examine, and for those who are still in education and know how to best support themselves or get support. I think that also goes a long way into being able to do the best in your job, whether or not the government or your state is doing something, or you're not getting paid as much as you should be.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great opportunity to dive right into some of the things that I want to talk to you about tonight, because we know that trenches, feeling like you're in the trenches, is going to happen no matter what. So I'm wondering, because on the show we talk about all things teams, how do strong teams help educators that they're working with navigate through the trenches?
Well, I really think people who come into a new team, let's say a department within a middle school or high school, really need to, first of all, find out kind of what the expectations are at that school, right? Because usually if you're a new teacher or new to that team, you don't know a lot of those things, right? There's not necessarily a new employee orientation for the school itself. So I think really having a subject area mentor or buddy, so to speak, helps that person a lot get adjusted and situated. I took over one time years ago for somebody who was retiring. They left all their material, but I brought in a lot of material too. So I think in that particular team, they were supportive, but a lot of the time when somebody's retired and they've been there a long time and you have your own ideas, it takes a little while to kind of get set in there. So, but I think if team members are open to hearing from the new team members' ideas, making sure, there's common planning time that goes into the master schedule. If you're a department chair, you're usually going to be on the instructional leadership team. So you should be able to have some common planning time during the week. And also, having somebody you can go to if, you're having family issues or, dealing with things outside of work and maybe you need to take extended time off or, you're just having that slump right throughout the year that many of us do. I think it goes a long way in having somebody on your team that you can go lean on for support, whether you're a brand new teacher or you've been in it for 15 years or so.
Yeah. And, as you're saying that, it reminds me of something that I so frequently think about with especially new hires that come onto a new team that maybe has been there for a while, and you may have your veteran people. I have heard the comment before, like if someone new comes in and they're bringing ideas, I've heard some people say to them, you just need to get your feet wet and learn, see how this team functions before you start sharing ideas. And I totally understand that perspective of just getting to understand how things function. At the same time, what's happening there is we are creating, unintentionally so, but we're creating silos for that person, and we're kind of leaving them out to figure things out on their own, instead of giving them a voice and a seat at the table. And so that's really no way to help them navigate out of the trenches. In fact, it just keeps them there.
Yeah. And I've also experienced that as well, right? When you're coming into a established team with people who've been there a while and having experience myself when I came into a team like that, there were silos, but I think if you have a large enough team, like I taught world languages, and so there were people, sometimes there were 4 on the team, sometimes there were 9. So it wasn't always necessarily the French teachers that I hung out with the most. Sometimes there were Spanish teachers that I connected most with on that world language team. So I think it also depends on who you feel like is on your side, right? Or has your back in those situations. And, some teachers are kind of that solo person out on an island, right? If you're in a smaller school and teach a elective class. So your team might look like, if you're an elective teacher, you might be hanging out with math teachers or science teachers or, but you should try to find at least somebody who you can collaborate with. If the school is not already setting something up, if you're like a singleton type teacher, because it's really important to, know what the kids are learning as well in those other subject areas. And cross-curricular planning, I think, is great. I had that embedded in the schedule in one of the schools I taught at. So we got to do a lot of fun projects there.
Yeah. And you really have to advocate for yourself in those situations too, right? Instead of assuming that those things are going to take place or thinking that the expectation is that you are able to collaborate and have those opportunities, it's not always going to happen depending on what school you're in and what the values are and what the practices have been. So you really just kind of had to sometimes, unfortunately, advocate for that on your own. In your book, you obviously, we talked about this earlier, you share stories of these educators who have turned challenges into growth. And I know when I came on your podcast, that was one of the things that we talked about is I talked about the challenges that led to growth. What do you feel like leaders can do to create clarity in tough moments for educators?
Well, I really think the most important thing leaders can do when they're trying to support their staff is to have emotional intelligence themselves, right? to know like how they're going to address issues. For example, if this is just from a recent school I worked at, if there's like an unplanned lockdown, for example, and it might last an hour or more, right? And you're going to have some type of a debrief with, the security people from the district, but it's the leader of a school who should be able to support the staff moving forward if there's some, challenge like that, right? Or if might have a death of a staff member or a death of a spouse of a staff member, right? The leader has to have some type of emotional intelligence to be able to support the staff through that. Or, there's schools I've worked at where they've had a student pass away, right? So it's really being able to, take charge and, getting supports. I mean, if you're in a large school system, they're going to have, counselors come in and all that, but really moving forward, it's not just that initial news that you're giving to the staff. It's like people are still going to be hurting a couple weeks later, right? And that's really following up with the staff members that affected the most. And I think when school personnel are working for a leader who does not have emotional intelligence, it is hard to stay in that position, right? I think most leaders are going to support what's best for students, but they don't always focus on also what's best for the adults in the building. They really need to take care of the adults as well. And then the adults will take care of the students and serve the students best. So yeah, I think sometimes also clarity comes in the form of messages and how they're being sent and how they're being worded, right? I think the principals who get the message out the best are those that just send those short tidbits in a newsletter maybe once a week, or like bulleted plans of the next step after something like a unplanned lockdown happens, for example, but not too much communication to everybody, right? It does become confusing, right? When you get a bunch of emails or, somebody among the staff did something wrong and they're sending it to the whole staff, right? That's something that I've seen happen a lot, right? So
Yeah.
That's kind of an attack on the rest of the staff because one person messed up. So I think, it comes with experience as well as a leader, but I think it's, making sure that you're seeing how people react when certain things happen and knowing that you need to be there as the leader of the school to, have your staff be able to lean on you.
Yeah. What you're saying kind of makes me think it's really clarity in action, not always necessarily clarity in communication, like we show clarity through our actions, but do you have to have that emotional intelligence to be able to do that? And if we aren't able to do that as leaders, if we don't have that piece, we also, and I've used this word already, but can unintentionally create trenches for people in schools. Yeah. So then let's talk, because you've talked a lot about collaboration with team members. How do you feel like leaders, team leaders or instructional coaches, instructional leaders, how do you feel like they can foster a culture where collaboration isn't just encouraged, but it becomes an essential part of who they are?
Well, I think it starts with having that time, right, to collaborate. If they're going to meet together as a team, as a PLC, for example, maybe only do that one day a week. Don't take away people's planning period every day, right? I've known schools where there's some type of a meeting during people's planning periods almost every day. Or if you're going to meet in the morning before school, make sure it's, one day a week or one day every other week, right? So really honor people's need to take their planning time to get things done. And then I think making sure that when you're doing those PLC meetings, that it is something that is impacting people's teaching, and that also everybody has a say in what's going to happen. I mean, if a PLC is creating rubrics, for example, don't just have one person or two people out of a group of 6 create the rubric. And I've been in PLCs before where I'm just sitting there, right? And there's other people who are talking, or, the people who are most experienced with this particular thing are the ones who are taking over the conversation, right? So I think once everybody's able to participate in a conversation, and if you have an instructional coach at the school who works with a group in different PLCs, they hopefully have been in most teachers' classrooms, and they know some of the strengths of different teachers, and they can also be kind of that nudge for the teacher who might not want to speak up and say, hey, I think so-and-so has this great thing to add, or, has experience teaching this particular method in the classroom. I think, that could also be that friendly nudge, because I think sometimes teachers in PLCs or departments, when they're working on curricula or rubrics, some of them are intimidated, especially if they're a newer staff member. And, having somebody who's that non-evaluated person, like an instructional coach, could be a great resource to, help them, I would say, just be more really not so passive in the conversation, and take more action. And then hopefully that person will then continue without the nudge of the instructional coach to really be more of a active part of that planning and conversation.
Yeah. When we think about that, the PLCs and the meetings that you're talking about, just like the ones that pile up, it's like if you're already in the trenches, and I'm just imagining like truly someone in the trenches, if you're already there and the meetings start to pile up, especially if they feel unproductive or pointless and they start to pile up, it's like you are getting buried deeper and deeper. And it's going to affect not only the climate, but the culture, and it's going to affect you on a very personal level as well.
Yeah.
And so we have to create new mastery experiences for people in those situations, which also probably means, to your point, really thinking about when we're having these, and how does that going to affect the time that they already have or don't have? And when we do have them, in what ways are we going to facilitate them so they are more life-giving instead of burdensome? So I love that you're bringing up just the nudges. Those are simple little actions that you can take as an instructional leader to make it just a little bit more productive and important to people. So we've talked a lot about collaboration. I truly believe in building cohesive, vision-driven teams, which is what this podcast is all about. But what are barriers that get in the way of building cohesive teams where people are thriving instead of feeling in the trenches? And how do you feel like leaders can overcome those barriers?
Well, I think we already mentioned one of the barriers is, having people that might take over the conversation, right? Some, I would say, more experienced or stronger speakers in a group who, might dominate things, right? That's a barrier. A barrier could also be just the not being able to observe colleagues in the team. I think it goes a long way to give teachers some release time so they can observe colleagues in their team or even in other subject areas in the school. I think another barrier is people that want to silo or, self-silo, let's say, or just distance themselves from the rest of the group, right? And just carry on by themselves, but they should be collaborating, right? So I think leaders and instructional coaches can overcome those barriers by really having that clear, setting the clear vision with the team as to what the outcome should be, why that's important to not self-silo or not distance yourself from what the rest of the group is doing. There are, different things that people are working on, for example, unit plans together as a team. There might be some people who, aren't really super happy about teaching a particular unit, right? And they're just, let's say, getting through it, right? But I think if teachers can come together and agree on, like, these are going to be activities where we're, exploring new ways of helping kids get engaged rather than, maybe teaching the same old thing that we have past couple of years, right? It helps bring more people on board. And then I think also in terms of a newer teacher, right? Really, as I mentioned before, helping them feel welcome, helping them, bring out what their experience is. And, if it's a teacher that recently student taught and maybe somebody that's on the team observed them student teach or knows how kind of what they've tried when they student taught, right? A lot of those new teachers have things that the veteran teachers don't always know, like ed tech tools or just different ways of getting kids engaged. So I think it goes a long way in asking that person to share what they think and really helping them feel included as well.
Yeah, a lot of what you're talking. So I love that you talked about self silos and distancing yourself. I don't think we talk about that enough in general. I don't think we point out. Well, not that it needs to be pointed out directly just to someone, but I think it needs to be made known. Like, this is something that can happen. You can start to distance yourself and self silo. What a fantastic word. Because I don't even know that we recognize when we start to do that. And I don't know that we recognize why, which is the probably more important thing to do, is to recognize why it's happening. But yeah, that's fantastic. So you have worked with so many educators who have felt stuck.
Yeah.
What are strategies you have seen work for those people or for teams to help them kind of regain focus?
Well, I think a lot of the time it's really visiting, like, what are the goals? What is the team working on? And is this working? Is it getting anywhere, right? And that could be visiting that particular rubric planning or, steps in curriculum, backwards planning, for example, reviewing that at the end of a quarter. I think a lot of the time that goes on for a semester or even most of a school year, and nothing really got accomplished, right? And then they look back on the year and they're like, oh, this people were just sitting in meetings, and really did that become anything somebody's going to bring to fruition? I've seen that happen as well. So I think really, and that's also something that brings people down, because they're like, either they were participating in the meeting or they might not have been, but then they realize, in the long run, how much is this really helping our teaching, right? So I think really going back to a cohesive, organized plan for the meeting with outcomes, and I think having that opportunity to either have people bring artifacts from what they're doing, or have teachers observe one another, and perhaps even do surveys in class, right, of students when they're addressing a certain topic that the whole team's planning, right? And seeing from each class that the teachers are teaching in this subject area, how is it going for them, right? And seeing if the student responses are all pretty similar for all the teachers. So I think there's a lot that can be done to help them regain focus. But I think a lot of time we kind of have blinders on into, like, really seeing outside of what we're planning, and that piece of observing others, the peer observation and the student feedback piece, I think is not attended to enough within our planning piece. We're kind of just sitting there as adults planning things, not really getting much input from others or hearing what other people are doing in their class or seeing as well. So,
yeah, well, I guess I'm just going to go back to the word that does absolutely make you feel stuck. Like, we are going nowhere fast, and I can't see the progress that I've made. I can't see the progress that my students have made. I can't see how they've engaged in this and how they've changed as a learner because of it. Yeah. And two, I know a lot of people kind of push back, or there is sometimes resistance to going on learning walks or observing or having people observe you. But if you can get into, if you can get to a point where that just becomes a part of the school's culture, then I think that's where we're going to see the walls start to break down and people feel uplifted and feel as though like this is something I can actually do. If so and so can do this, then I can do this too. Or if I can bring this to the table and so saw this,
Yeah.
then I know that I'm a contributor on this team.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So there's always a balance. Like leaders have to find a balance between structure and the flexibility to adapt when teams face challenges. How do
Mm-hmm.
you think leaders can strike that balance?
Really, I think it's making sure the leader is coming in as well to check in, right? If they're kind of rotating to different teams and the team meets, all teams meet once a week, just making sure as a leader you're in every team once every month or every 3 weeks, right? Also, checking in with teachers individually, which could be those just walkthroughs or um, those informal observations, and seeing how well what is being planned in the team aligns with the instructional practice. But I also think if there are teams where, some people do feel like they're kind of being intentionally siloed or left out, that as a leader, instructional coach, or a school leader, administrator, that you're helping kind of get the team back on the right track, right? Because there could be a strong leader in the team that takes over, a teacher who really wants to dominate the conversation, or two teachers, right? And as an instructional coach or a school leader, you can see that coming in from the outside, especially if you're rotating to different teams in the school, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's the responsibility of a leader to help kind of bring those people back and help people really understand that everybody should be able to be part of the conversation. And then, I think when it starts affecting people and they feel like their ideas aren't being valued, then yes, they will start feeling like they're in survival mode and they'll start looking for other jobs and not feel like they're valued in terms of like what they have to say. So I think making sure that the leaders giving a gentle nudge to that those people who might be dominating the conversation as well.
100%. And leaders that might require you to have some crucial conversations. And
Mhm.
that is not only okay, but necessary if you want
Yeah.
everyone to feel as though they have a voice at the table. There is an episode, and I cannot remember the number, but you can look it up. I'll try to remember to put it in the show notes. But in one of my episodes, I talk about a strategy called perception checking. And I think the title of the episode is How to Say What You Feel Can't Be Said. So
Mhm.
take a look at that. That can help you to have those crucial conversations so you can eliminate people feeling like they're stuck. So, for those educators who do feel stuck and like they're in survival mode, what is one mindset shift you would suggest or an action step they could take to help them move forward?
I think really realizing that this isn't going to last forever, right? We're in March right now, and I think if you're a teacher who's wanting to implement some new ideas and activities, but you don't feel like that's being honored, maybe within the team meetings, you could still do some of these things in your classroom and then share out in the team meeting about how this was implemented. Like if you've been to a conference recently, for example, and want to try something like gaming or something within the classroom, gamification, because the conference I was at was world languages. So there, we do a lot of games to learn languages. So, I think it's also helping that be part of those artifacts as an individual teacher that go into your evaluation. Whatever tool your district might use, are many tools where they want you to upload what you're doing, and it could be just the design of a lesson or a PDF or a picture from something that the students did. So I think those things go a long way to just also focus on what you can control, right? I think that's a big piece as well, because when teachers are in the trench, right, it is really working within your own bubble as well to do the best of those things that you can control to be the best teacher for your students.
Yeah, Absolutely. Okay, I have so enjoyed this conversation. I have taken away lots of ideas and thoughts for myself. Some terms that you threw out that I absolutely loved. So this has been so wonderful. Where can our listeners connect with you?
So on social media, Facebook, X, and LinkedIn at Dana Goodier. I'm on Instagram, Blue Sky, and also on YouTube at Out of Trenches PC. And my website is danagoodier.com. And you can get my book, Out of the Trenches, Stories of Resilient Educators, on Amazon.
Yeah. And that will be linked in the show notes. So you guys, if you are watching, be sure to go to the podcast, look at the show notes, grab those things, find Dana in all of the places that she mentioned. And then also would love, love, love for you guys to leave a review for the podcast so other leaders can find the show. Then go listen to her show and leave her a review so people can find her podcast as well. Because I think it is such an important topic for us to be talking about, is how do we help educators in general get not just through the trenches, but I love your wording is out of the trenches. Yeah. So thank you so much for this conversation. It has been such a blast. All right, everybody. We're going to close up. We're going to close up shop. And as we close, be sure to be on the lookout for next week's episode. We'll catch you later. Bye, Dana. Hey there, thanks for joining this episode. I would love for you to do me 3 solid favors before you head out. Number 1, subscribe to this show. I've got a lot of great guests and content coming up, and I don't want you to miss any of it. Number 2, share this show. Share it with your like-minded colleagues and friends and those leaders who are eager to build cohesive, vision-driven teams. And finally, connect with me on all the social media platforms. You can find me at Catch Up with KC on Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Until next time, go off and create teams that leave people feeling inspired, empowered, and eager for more each day.